Have you ever been in the situation where you wonder, have you ever asked yourself, God is all powerful and is a good God and is omnipotent. Why does he allow bad things happen upon the earth? Why does he allow evil to prevail upon the earth and things like that? Why doesn't God just come and stop all this evil that is happening, people dying, kidnapping, and all that? Well, I will use just 3 scriptures that will help us explain this particular happening on the earth. It does not explain 100%, but to an extent it helps us understand why God cannot just come to the earth and stop evil from happening. When God created man, this is not part of the scripture, but this is just as a foundation for us to understand what I'm saying. When God created man, the Bible tells us that he blessed man and he said, let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the bird of the air. If you go to Genesis chapter 1, you will get the whole scripture there. I read somewhere in Job chapter 38, verse 33, where God said to Job, he said, knowest thou the ordinances of heaven, and canst thou establish its dominion upon the earth? That question tells us something. I just quoted King James, but if you read from other versions, I'm going to just scroll past some versions on the screen just so you will get the point of what I'm saying. That question is telling Job, do you know the laws of the Spirit, and can you use them to regulate the things that are happening upon the earth? Men of God has taught us several that a thing has to be established in the spirit for it to manifest physically. And when it is established in the spirit, of course, it must manifest physically. We have been taught severally. Basically, we understand that it has to happen first in the spirit for it to happen physically. But then God is asking Job, do you know the ordinances of heaven? And can you use it to establish God's dominion upon the earth? Remember, when Jesus was walking on earth, he taught his disciples how to pray. That is Matthew chapter 6 and Luke chapter 11. He taught his disciples to pray, and he told them, he said, I'm just going to read just take one line of that prayer, what we know as the Lord's Prayer. He said, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. For Jesus to be teaching his disciples to pray to God that his will be done on earth as it is in heaven. What he's trying to tell us there is that the way God's will is done on earth is not always as it is in heaven. It is always different from the way it is done in heaven. So the prayer that Jesus told his disciples to pray, they should pray to God that his will should be done on earth the way his will is done in heaven. Which is to tell you that God's will on earth is not everything that happens on earth, but it is possible to pray that his will should be done on earth the way it is done in heaven, because there is a way God's will is done in heaven, and it is most times it is different from the way God's will is done on earth. So for Jesus to ask us to pray, it means there is a difference in the way God's will happens on earth, different from the way it happens in heaven. Remember the book of Psalms chapter 115 verse 16. He said, the heavens, even the heavens of heavens belong to God. He said, but the earth has he given to the sons of men. Take note, the heavens belong to God, but he has given the earth to the sons of men. In other words, God is in control of everything that happens in heaven. But whatever happens on earth, he has given the control to the sons of men. So, for God's will to be done on earth, like he told Job, you have to understand the ordinances of heaven, so you can be able, as a son of man that God has given the earth to establish God's dominion upon the earth. So it is not God's fault that his will is not done on earth. It is simply because men have not been able to understand the ordinances of heaven and establish his dominion upon the earth. You want God's will to be done in your life, you have to understand the ordinances of heaven and establish his will in your life. You want God's will to be done in your situation, understand the ordinances of heaven and partner with God so that his will can be done in earth as it is in heaven. For God to do something on the earth, the Bible tells us that surely the Lord will do nothing except he reveals to his servant the prophet. His servant the prophet is a son of man. So the condition for God to establish something upon the earth is that he has to partner with someone who is in that status of son of man. So if your status is not that of a son of man, then God cannot partner with you. So for God to partner with you to establish his will on the earth, your status has to be the son of man. That's why when Jesus came to live amongst us, he kept calling himself the Son of Man. And we see how Jesus kept establishing the dominion of God upon the earth. Jesus said, ought not this daughter of Zion, who Satan has bound these 15 years, I believe, which is to tell you that it was not the will of God for her to be bound, but Jesus had to establish God's dominion, had to establish God's will. So for God's will to be done on earth, it has to be that a son of man has to partner with him. So if your government does not partner with God, then God's will cannot be done on earth. If those in authority does not partner with God, then God's will cannot be done on earth. Even in your life, you have the authority over your life. So if you do not partner with God, God's will cannot be done in your life. God's will can only be done in your life when you agree to partner with him for his will to be done in your life. That's why there are times God may want something to happen, but the government may want another thing to happen. And in the end, it is the government's will that is done. Why? Because the heavens belong to God. It is only in heaven that God's will can be done without resistance. But on earth, for God's will to be done, there has to be the involvement of a son of man. So as long as you are a son of man, you can establish God's will in your life. You can establish God's will in your family. You can establish God's will in your destiny. Just make sure that you can partner with God. And remember that nothing is impossible with God. God bless you.